Way back in 1986, Arnold Schwarzenegger would do a movie more so as a business move to desperately get out from under a studio contract that he was in. This was also a movie that was made for the primary purpose of funding another future film that Arnold would star in, but at the time had Patrick Swayze cast in the lead. Sadly, this movie would be a box office bomb, but when looking back at it with a retrospective approach, one can see where it delivers some fun, cheesy 80s action, violence, and bravado. This is also a hidden gem on Schwarzenegger's resume. So let's get into the behind the scenes and on the screen action of Raw Deal to see how it holds up. What's happening out there, guys? Thank you as always for stopping by the channel. If you are new here, welcome to the channel. I'm Anthony DeJoya and this is Movies Never Say Die, your home for 80s and 90s retro movie content. Consider liking this video if you enjoy it and hit that subscribe button if you like the content so you can keep up to date with all my new videos when they are released. Now, today's movie is Raw Deal, and as I said, it's a bit of an understated movie on Arnold's early 80s resume. Now, at this point, back in 86, Arnold, you could say, was certainly a well-known action star, but he wasn't quite yet that global icon. He captured the world's attention with The Terminator in 84. He also starred in Conan the Barbarian in 82, then Conan the Destroyer in 84. He played sort of a knockoff Conan in 85's Red Sonja, and that same year he would star in Commando, which is essentially his answer to Stallone's Rambo. This would be really the first film where Arnold would be given some denser dialogue. Not too dense by any means, but much more than audiences were used to with him playing a robot or a barbarian. And I would say Commando would be the first of the movies that would start to slowly humanize the hulking action star, and thus, with its success, would come 1986's Raw Deal, a by-the-numbers action flick mashed up with this organized crime drama that would rely on everything that worked well for Arnold at that point in his career, which was looking intimidating, dropping the humble beginnings of his trademark one-liners, and taking out armies of bad guys all by himself. As I mentioned in the intro, Arnold really had no interest in being in this movie outside of finally getting to wear some suits, since he said in an interview that his wardrobe budgets at the time were seemingly around $10. At this point in his career, Arnold was also still locked into a multi-picture contract with Dino De Laurentiis, who during the 80s had his own studio, the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. Arnold had done his 2 Conan movies with DEG and then was supposed to fill a beefed-up cameo role in Red Sonja in 1985. But what was supposed to be just a week of filming turned into almost a month, and when Arnold saw the film, he realized he'd been elevated to the co-star of the film without his knowledge. Now, at this time, De Laurentiis was also heavily into a film idea that would be called Total Recall. Arnold very much wanted to star in this Total Recall movie, but De Laurentiis didn't feel Arnold had the range, plus he had Patrick Swayze already lined up for the part.
Excuse me, could you move to the side a little bit?
Your lights.
Thank you.
Clearly being able to see he had been typecast as this barbarian type character by De Laurentiis, Arnold agreed to star in Raw Deal. This was a movie De Laurentiis was only making for the purpose of generating money for Total Recall with Swayze, so Arnold's condition for doing the film was that his contract with DEG would be dissolved, as well as a paycheck, of course. And considering he earned $2 million for Commando in 85 and $3.5 million for Predator in 87, you would assume that it would have been somewhere in between that. Raw Deal would go into production with a budget of $8.5 million. John Irvin, who only had a few films under his belt at the time, most notably being The Dogs of War, starring Christopher Walken, would be hired to direct. Routine Sergio Leone writers Luciano Vincenzoni and Sergio Donati were brought in to write the script, with Gary DeVore and Norman Wexler coming in to write the screenplay, as well as making some added revisions to tailor the material more to Arnold's skill set. And I think this is where you can clearly see the contrast between the crime drama elements and those of pure 80s action cinema. Production went relatively smooth. Filming would last from October to December of 85 throughout parts of Chicago, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Other working titles for this movie were Let's Make a Deal and Triple Identity, but ultimately Raw Deal was chosen since it sounded more like a standard action movie, and once completed, Raw Deal would hit in over 1,700 theaters across the US, and it would pull in $5.4 million to land in the number 2 spot its opening weekend between Top Gun, which was sitting at number 1 in its 4th week, and of course Stallone's Cobra, which was sitting in the number 3 position in its 3rd week. Unfortunately, though, the film would only pull in $16.2 million in the States, and Raw Deal would not be that moneymaker De Laurentiis hoped it would be. Soon after this film, he would file for bankruptcy. Many of the IP properties that were in process under the DEG umbrella would be sold off to Carolco, including Total Recall, which we all know Arnold would later go on to star in. De Laurentiis would eventually leave DEG to start another company down the road, and he would continue to produce films for many years, and as we all know, Arnold would grow into a global star, but the two would never work together again. Now, as an action film from the 80s, Raw Deal is more than adequate in my opinion. It's far from spectacular, and it's far from as splashy as the other movies Arnold would go on to star in. However, I think it does hold its place as one of those films from the first half of the decade that I think were much more similar to the grindhouse action movies of guys like Charles Bronson, where bloody violence took more of a focus than explosive action that would dominate what I think would be the back half of the decade. It's a standard action movie plot for the time. Arnold plays a former FBI agent turned small town sheriff. Meanwhile, FBI agents trying to infiltrate a violent mob syndicate are being killed off, signifying a leak inside the agency. So Kaminsky is brought in to go undercover to bring the whole thing down. That's essentially the gist of it. There are more plot threads here, but to be honest, the story overall is a bit messy, and it's filled with a few too many holes to be a compelling crime drama, yet it lays more than enough substance for a straight up fun action flick. Raw Deal overall just keeps a swift pace. It does maneuver itself to fit around Arnold's trademarks. He's a little bit more human in this role despite his action figure presence, but I think his confident sarcasm works nicely for the mood of the plot. He's charming, he's intimidating, he's also a bit humorous as he's dropping some cheesy lines and some jokes here and there, but really it's all fluff to fill in between the violence, and I think this department could be a reason why this film often gets overlooked. Because I would say the action in this movie overall is just fine, and I think Arnold does command the screen when needed, but there's nothing overly memorable in this movie outside of maybe just how ordinary all the violence really is. There are some fight sequences during the middle of the movie that consist of Arnold dropping guys with one hulking punch or throwing them across the room like a rag doll. There's also a solid chase sequence later in the film that gets the adrenaline up a little bit with the use of old school practical effects and stunt work. And he even gets his Commando moment where he assembles his massive artillery to prepare for his final battle. But him driving through a quarry, listening to the Rolling Stones and taking dudes out from 100 yards or more with a machine gun while driving all over the place doesn't land with the intended impact, nor does his final one-on-many showdown in the closing that feels more like standard cinematic gunplay than anything that can get your blood flowing. It's all fine, but nothing memorable. Raw Deal really felt like Arnold's response to Stallone's Cobra, a crime drama action movie hybrid, much like Cobra was a psychological thriller action movie hybrid. Raw Deal's problem is that it takes itself too seriously during the quiet moments when the substance isn't really there. Still though, in the hands of Arnold, Raw Deal is a fun movie to revisit if you want to see Arnold's early rise as an action star, because despite this film's flaws, his screen presence is can't miss. So in the end, I will give Raw Deal a solid C+. It's not a fantastic movie, but it's a solid film, and it is a hidden gem on Arnold's resume. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking out. If you have seen it, let me know what you think down in the comments. As always, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I greatly appreciate you. I will see you all in my next video, and until then, movies never say die.
This is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?
What's up, guys? Thanks for stopping by the channel. Today I'm diving into a movie that I think truly defined the gusto, the bravado, and the spectacle that just made us love 80s action movies. I'm talking about the 85 classic starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as John Matrix, a man that carries trees on his shoulders, enjoys his ice cream, and when his daughter is kidnapped, he goes commando. Now, in the early 80s, audiences could not get enough of the action genre, and no two stars were bigger, literally, than Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. Now, these guys may be grandpa buddies now, but in the 80s, as each began their rise, there was no doubt a dislike and a competition between them to outdo the other at the box office, which was a rivalry that would treat all of us fans to a buffet of action flicks for a few decades. While Stallone was in his little world building Rocky and Rambo franchises, Arnold was building a couple of franchises of his own. Conan the Barbarian dropped to a lot of praise in 1982, putting him on Hollywood's radar. The sequel, Conan the Destroyer, was a decline coming out in 1984, but that would also be the same year Arnold would star as the T-800 in James Cameron's The Terminator, which would certainly be a boost to his career.
I'll be back.
Then would come 1985. Now, this was admittedly the year of Sylvester Stallone. Rocky IV and Rambo II would be the number 3 and 4 top earning films at the global box office that year. Rambo II would also, I think, change the game of just blockbuster action flicks overall, with massive practical effects and a staggering body count as John Rambo destroys an entire army to rescue some POWs. Now, on his little part of the world, seeing this, Arnold didn't want to be left out, so we would get to see him as John Matrix in his own one-man army movie, and surprisingly, the first moderately humanized character that he would take on. Which really is a weird thing to say, because there's no doubt he's superhuman in this movie, but this would be the first time we would get to see Arnold in a contemporary setting, and between all the moments of killing and the frequent feats of strength, he was just a normal guy with a young daughter. The dialogue, unlike Arnold's previous films, was opened up much more, and it would make Commando, I think, the introduction to the Schwarzenegger double entendres, the one-liners, and the cheesy puns that we've loved from him over the years. Because at the time, playing Conan and a Terminator really required a lack of personality and little emotional expression, and playing John Matrix would be the first time Arnold would be free to kind of let his charm shine, and I think it worked perfectly for this just delightfully ridiculous action flick. It would also kind of cement Arnold as a bona fide action hero too, because he delivers almost as many fantastically cheesy lines as he does joyfully gratuitous kills.
Remember, Sally, when I promised to kill you last?
That's right, Major. You did.
I lied.
Principal photography on Commando would begin in April of 1985, and filming would take place in various places throughout Southern California for 45 days. Premiere weekend would be on October 4th, 1985, and Commando would open at number 1 at the box office, holding that place for 3 straight weeks. It would finish with $57 million on just a $9 million budget, and that's not even counting the home video market, which was massive in the 80s, which I think would make this film a financial success. I'm sure I came close to wearing my VHS tape out as a kid watching this movie so many times. The plot is bare bones, with Matrix having his daughter kidnapped by a South American dictator and his cronies. He's forced to travel to the fictional country of Valverde to assassinate a political figure, but of course Arnold escapes, and he has 11 hours to locate and rescue his daughter. This is the same amount of time that the flight to Valverde would take. It's all very simple, but more than effective for just a fun, mindless 90-minute journey of comical dialogue, excessive action, and Arnold Schwarzenegger at full speed, just killing anything in his way and dispensing laughably bad lines along the way that are also as equally endearing. I mean, this movie is set in a hyper-realistic world. It knows exactly what it is, and I think the self-awareness in Commando is what makes it stand the test of time.
And why not they just call him Girl George? It will cut down all the confusion, I think.
You're a funny guy, Sally. I like you. That's why I'm going to kill you last.
I'll be back, Benny.
What'd you do with Sully?
I let him go.
The Green Beret's gonna kick your big ass.
I eat green berets for breakfast. And right now I'm very hungry.
Elaine, I hope you're watching the clothes because I can't take my eyes off the passion.
And I don't think there's any doubt that Arnold's screen presence alone was able to pull this movie up from the ranks of B action flicks to make it a theatrical success, and rightfully so, as he does feel larger than life. It's a non-stop showcase of his physical ability, yet somehow it's all fits snugly into this tightly paced rescue mission that manages to thread all the action sequences together just enough. But John Matrix is not alone in his mission. He gets a partner named Cindy, the flight attendant in the wrong place at the wrong time, played by Ray Dawn Chong. They actually do have a charming chemistry together, despite being such an odd and unlikely pair. There really is no reason for her to even invest in Matrix's problems, but it was an action movie from the 80s. It was a much simpler time, so you kind of just roll with her getting swept up in all the chaos and firing off rocket launchers without needing to really overthink it.
As soon as you're getting into a bigger-than-life character that Arnold was playing, and we're really trying to make Arnold work in a contemporary setting, which he really had not been in, and we really talked about slowly moving the bar, we thought what would mitigate all this would be somebody who noticed how preposterous it was.
I set up the tragedy and the reality, and then he gets to take the air out of it. I was the Laurel to his Hardy in that, you know, I'm worried, and the more I did that, the better his smug but funny, you know, flippant comments, the better they would ricochet and bounce off.
Wait for me! Don't you go anywhere! Who the hell are you, huh? Oh! You steal my car, you rip the seat out, you kidnap me, you ask me to help you find your daughter, which I very kindly do.
And every action movie gets an action movie hero, which means we need to get an action movie villain. And with Vernon Wells as the chain mesh wearing Captain Bennett, this movie certainly does have an eccentric one.
You know, we've gone away from that having the wonderful character of the hero and the villain. You know, now your villains become terribly wishy-washy. Mine is a scary bad guy. You know that if you confront me, I'm going to break your neck and you know, suck out your brains.
When I met him the first day, I said, God, how is he going to pull off playing a mean guy? He's so nice. But when you say action, he can be so mean that I look at him and I say, wait a minute, what's happening here? You know, and he comes with this knife at me and he starts fighting and all this kind of thing. And he's incredible the way he gets into it. And so we work very well together, yeah, absolutely, and he's scary.
I think Wells' Bennett is both amazingly good and comically bad, yet it all works like it was just meant to be. He really is no match for John Matrix. I mean, I kind of sort of wish Bill Duke's Cook would have been the main heavy, but at the same time, without Wells' performance, we wouldn't have gotten these just amazing cinematic moments.
I don't need no guns! I'm gonna kill you now!
I mean, it's so bad it's good. You don't know what Bennett wants more, if he wants to fight Matrix or if he wants to fuck him, yet the end result is 80s action movie cheese at its finest.
That's what you want to do, right?
I'm gonna kill you, John.
Come on, let the girl go. It's between you and me. Come on, Bennett. Let's party.
Arnold is a true superhero in this movie, just without the costume. The film opens with Arnold carrying a tree over his shoulder like an Austrian Paul Bunyan, but that's just the appetizer. He has super hearing, he also has super smelling, he can jump from planes, he rips the seats out of cars, he's flipping cars, he's flipping phone booths, he can toss grown men around like rag dolls, he's a pilot, he's a boat skipper, not to mention one hell of a gardener. He can do it all, and watching each minute of this nonsense is absolutely amazing. Commando has a great instrumental score. It fits nice and snugly into the genre standard 90-minute runtime. It begins quickly with bodies dropping as Matrix's old team is being picked off, and it really is such an engaging movie to get swept up in, with a ton of action-packed moments that all do escalate nicely until we see Matrix mowing down a wave of soldiers with a variety of weapons in the finale. I always loved the opening scene of this movie with Bill Duke as the garbage man. I still randomly think of this sequence when I'm pulling the trash out to my curb on an early morning sometimes. The entire mall sequence is filled with so much fun nostalgia as Arnold is just manhandling the mall cops and swinging around from the ceiling. And outside of the finale, I really think the fight between Cook and Matrix in the hotel room is the best one-on-one fight in this movie. I love watching these two guys battle it out, and I mean, hey, you gotta give Commando huge kudos for being progressive, because rarely in the 80s in an action movie would you see the girl having a guy bent over in the bed unless she was a topless nurse taking his temperature the old-fashioned way. But I mean, hands down, the best sequence in Commando, to me at least, is when Matrix is wounded and out of bullets and taking guys out with random tools from the garden shed. To me, Commando is one of those movies that just oozes 80s action movie awesomeness. When Matrix hits the compound at the end, this movie writes the dictionary definition of gratuitous, over-the-top violence. It's just, I don't know, heartwarming to sit back and enjoy the body counts pile up, and even the blatant flaws are able to result in more of nostalgic charm, and that really means you're onto something when even the bad things that you do come off as kind of good. There are visible dummies in front of the buildings. The buildings themselves are clearly thin, hollow shells. You can see the springboards, and even these soldiers must be on the Valverde gymnastics team because their form is impeccable, yet still, none of this seems to get in the way of the appeal in watching Arnold launching rockets and ripping off on his machine gun and taking down a bottomless supply of cardboard bad guys. The camera work is nice and smooth. I think the daytime setting provides a lot of visual appeal, and it's so much fun watching Arnold in full action mode, working his way throughout this playground of this massive compound, taking people out. It's just an iconic finale for 80s action movies. Matrix is killing in so many different ways, and like it should for any 80s action movie, it comes down to the one-on-one showdown between Matrix and Bennett. This classic showdown is more memorable for its dialogue than its technical action, but I mean, at the same time, it's also the perfect on-the-nose closing for this action movie that really knew exactly what it was. And that concludes my look back at Commando, guys. This was one of my favorite action movies growing up as a kid. I just loved this VHS copy. I cherished it. And even as an adult, I can appreciate this movie for just the ridiculous ride that it is. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this movie. What are some of your favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movies? I'd love to hear some of your guys' opinions. And until the next video, I'll catch you guys at the movies.
It's Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?
See you later. I'm gonna go this way now.